Hello everyone and welcome back. It's good to see you all. And as you can see today, we're going to talk about the reactions to the treaty. This is the big reaction. Now, we mentioned, if you remember last time, they signed this treaty 6th of December 1921. And I say, there we are. There they are coming back now. And I say these reactions and this growing division you're going to have in the treaty, we're going to look at that today. And we're going to look at, let's say, how this sort of cleavage, which is going to lead to civil war, comes about, and what are the key arguments that both sides are making. We'll try and give them both a kind of fair hearing. And I say that will pave the way then for looking at the deeper split next time when we talk about the military split, because that's going to be the real big kind of problem, is when the IRA itself begins to kind of divide. Now, when they come back with the treaty and when it's published in the press and there's a lot of hoopla and sort of celebration and so on, an agreement, I think, to be fair, if you want to gauge an initial reaction from the Irish people, it's widespread relief. I think most people are kind of relieved. You know, the vast majority of all levels of Irish society, the vast majority of people, you know, they want peace. I say this war had been awful and it had been getting worse, and the casualty list had been growing, more disorder, more reprisal. And finally now it's over and they've reached something of an agreement. Immediately jumping on board in favour of this treaty, of course, are the key elites within Irish nationalist society. So the Catholic Church gives it its backing. The press, overwhelmingly the press, says this is a great day for Ireland, finally peace and we're moving forward, etc. The business elites, the farming elites, so all your top people, as it were, your top elites in this society are all very much backing the treaty. So also, I suppose very notably, were the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Now, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, as we said, who have a kind of ambiguous role within the War of Independence, but they meet on the 11th of December to discuss this, and in their Central Committee, and they pass it now, 11 votes to 4. So they're backing the whole thing. Now, of course, Michael Collins is in charge of the IRB and will, as we'll see, be very much in charge of this new Irish state for what's left of his life. He's not going to live, of course, very long, Collins. So he has huge influence in terms of this. One of the people voting against, by the way, is a man called Liam Lynch. And Liam Lynch is going to later go on to be chief of staff of the Republicans in the Civil War. Again, we'll talk about him later. But he claims, Liam Lynch, that the IRB rank and file were largely anti-treaty, as we'll see, as most of the IRA were. But the higher ranks, as it were, on this committee, they follow Collins and Mulcahy. And there are rumours, allegations at the time that Collins, because he's now plugged into the power source, has a lot of patronage and is able to, you know, put people in jobs. So self-interest, I'm afraid, is, you know, the fact is, you've got a new state here, you're going to be new jobs, you know, Ministry of Defence and, you know, commissions in the army, potentially. And yeah, a number of people are, it's argued anyway, rather than voting for this out of principle, are voting for it because it suits them. And I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure that is probably the case. But anyway, on the surface, the IRB backs this as well. That's a big deal. And so there's a general kind of positivity that you get. I mean, the British, for example, release, in the wake of the signing of this agreement, all of the prisoners from the War of Independence. So all these people they've been rounding up and stuff and putting in prison, all these IRA members, they're all released now. It all seems kind of, on the surface, as you'd say, peace is declared today. Well, fantastic. However, right from the start, we also get opposition. And what's ironic about this is the split develops not at the bottom, but at the top. So you don't know, protests on the, as it were, the grassroots. It's at the top it starts, and right at the heart of this revolutionary government. De Valera, of course, is a key figure in all of this. And as we said, De Valera had wanted this document referred back to him. And that agreement wasn't honoured. I said they're plenipotentiaries, they decided to go ahead anyway. De Valera himself claimed to be furious when he read the contents of the treaty. Although, I mean, that is very disingenuous. It's very clear De Valera knew exactly what they were agreeing. There were people on the Irish delegation feeding all this information back to him. So I think he absolutely knew what was going on. That's, again, that's a very disingenuous way for him to paint his reaction. Now, so his anger, as was real or imagined, whatever it is, leads him to threaten to sack the members of the cabinet who'd signed the treaty. Cathal Brewer, who's the very uncompromising Dáil Minister of Defence, he makes a threat to have all of the delegates arrested as soon as they get off the boat, and all these rather dramatic things. So this, I say, is happening right at the top now. They come together now, the cabinet do, and I'll just show you here some of the cabinet. So right at the top, heart of the cabinet, and it's not even the full cabinet, they bring together now the inner cabinet now. So these are the key people, the key ministerial posts, as it were. And what happens in the inner cabinet is a very stormy meeting. There's 7 members of this, and a lot of back and forth. And eventually they end up taking a vote. And as you can see, there are 4 members. Collins, Griffith, Martin and Cosgrave are in favour of the treaty, with 3 against. So it looks as if the pro-treaty side at least has won that battle. But then what happens, and this is very strange, they then bring in the rest, as it were, of the outer junior ministers, if you like, and have another debate. Then they have a vote on that. But in this broader, bigger cabinet, the anti-treaty side win 8-7. So again, it's very difficult to work out exactly what opinion is. It's so, I say, finely balanced between both sides. So following this rather ambiguous response from the government, if you like, the attention turns now to the Dáil. And the Dáil, the idea is that the Dáil's going to meet, this is part of the agreement itself, and they have to ratify the treaty. So they have to, that because they're representatives of the Irish people, etc., etc. And they're going to get together now. So this is going to be the key forum now for this to happen. It's going to happen very soon after the treaty's signed, and is going to span essentially a 2-week period over Christmas into the early week of 1922. And these debates, which are going to be based at University College Dublin, by the way, not at the Mansion House, which is the usual place where they hold their meetings and where they establish the Dáil itself, they're going to be incredibly passionate, incredibly bitter affairs as well, and get very, very personal. I think it's one thing in the Michael Collins film it gets right. It doesn't get much right, but I think there's a scene in that where they show the treaty debates, and I think it gives a good idea of the atmosphere. There's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of aggression, and very personal stuff. So now let me just outline, if I can, and here's 2 posters from both sides to sort of frame what we're going to talk about next. To look at the cases for both sides and what their arguments are, and we'll try and give them a fair hearing. We'll try and not be partisan in terms of this. One great problem with Irish historical writing is so many books that you'll read are incredibly partisan when it comes to the treaty. They're pro-treaty or anti-treaty. You look at someone like Tom Garvin with his book 1922, The Birth of Irish Democracy. It's almost like pro-treaty propaganda, But I think as historians, we've got to be bigger than that. We've got to try and step back a bit and, I say, give both sides in all of these debates a kind of fair hearing. So what's the pro-treaty argument? Well, the pro-treaty argument is not really an appeal, as it were, to the unblemished virtues of the treaty. The treaty isn't, like the American Constitution or something, this sort of holy scripture. No, it's basically a plea for pragmatism. It's saying, this is the best deal we could have got, which I think is probably true. I think you could argue that, maybe a few bells and whistles here. And And Collins says, a very famous phrase in these treaty debates, he says, this treaty does not offer us the ultimate freedom that all nations desire, but it does offer us the freedom to achieve it. So the freedom to achieve freedom. So we can use this now as a base. We've got our own army, we've got our own parliament, and all we can do, I suppose like the Dominions have done, as we said, is slowly decouple ourselves now from the British Empire and move further and further away. Now, of course, that's exactly what's going to happen in Irish history, of course. The Irish Republic itself, of course, will be created or the Republic of Ireland, will be created in 1949, and that will be preceded by, a steady disengagement, growing independence for this Irish Free State now, and the abolishing of all these links with the British Empire. So that will happen. Now, but you've got to remember, and this is, again, it's very difficult, this, but no one at the time knows this. They don't know that it's actually going to be this evolutionary process going forward. So the anti-treaty side, even though I suppose ultimately you could say they're proved wrong in terms of what they're saying, they didn't know. They thought this was it. The key people in terms of the pro-treaty side, Collins and Griffith, of course, and also Kevin O'Higgins, who is, he's going to be a key spokesperson for this. And Higgins himself is going to be, particularly during the Civil War, is going to end up being the Minister of Home Affairs and a pretty hard-line minister, as we'll see, but a rising star, as it were, on the pro-treaty side of everything. So the argument is, look, it's practical. Look at this tree. Look at what it gives us. It's, lots and lots of this, these chances finally to build something, and no more bloodshed. Peace at last. And if you do reject this treaty, what's going to happen? It's going to be more war, more killing, and the people don't want that anymore. So it's a very practical and a very persuasive argument. Absolutely. Now, on the anti-treaty side, their argument tends to be, as it were, the opposite of the pragmatic argument, appeal to idealism and the sanctity of the Republic, of course. They argue, and again, remember, forget your hindsight, they argue, though, that this isn't going to be the end of the conflict. This is just another false dawn. Now, on the road to inevitable separation, that's going to happen, which is the only way to really bring true peace to Ireland, is to finally accept that Irish people want full separation. So the appeal of the anti-treaty side is it's passionate, ideological. The treaty particularly is painted as a betrayal of the dead martyrs of 1916. And, to be fair, I say let's give them a hearing, the anti-treaty side. Imagine the situation, you've been fighting down there in South Tipperary, enduring all this stuff, all these tortures and God knows what, it's horror show. And then suddenly a truce is agreed without any real consultation with you. And then what emerges is this murky compromise. And I think you could sum it up by, I suppose the point would be, what would Patrick Pearse think of this? There's a very powerful argument. And all you've got to do is say that. What would they have thought of this, these martyrs? This, whatever this thing is. This isn't the Republic. So I say, hindsight, we have to get rid of hindsight. And what they hate particularly is the idea of taking an oath of allegiance to the British monarch, which again seems rather abstract to us and doesn't seem much of a substantive issue, but it is a very powerful one. I'll show you. Here is the oath of allegiance. It's not very big. So you can see, I do solemnly swear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the Irish Free State, as by law established, and that I will be faithful to His Majesty the King George V, his heirs and successors by law, in virtue of the common citizenship of Ireland with Great Britain, and our adherence to and membership of the group of nations forming the British Commonwealth of Nations. So, there you go. That's what most people are saying in all these dominions and things. Now, it's not as if you have to say this all the time. This is what you say when you take a seat in the Dáil, in the Parliament, as it would become an MP. You sort of say this thing. But they are really angry about this. And the point they make, again, try and give them a fair hearing, is they'd already taken an oath to the Republic. they're being asked now to go back on that solemn oath they took to the Republic established in 1916. That's very difficult for these people when they consider the sacrifice. You know, did my brother die for this? Or, you know, was I tortured? I had to, you know, see these terrible things, experience these terrible things, do these terrible things. You know, these young men and violence, trauma. Again, you can see the power of it, even if you don't kind of agree with kind of both sides. Now, what's interesting, so there's a kind of emotional appeal about the anti-treaty side to this. And you see this particularly with the role of women. Female TDs, if you remember, these widows and so on we mentioned, who always wear black, and they were always in the ranks of the anti-treaty side. And as we said, they always end up going for the more radical separatist line in any kind of debate or whatever. So the wives and sisters and husbands and so on. So they are there. They are very much voting, I say, with the anti-treaty side. It's quite funny, actually. What happens is there's so many of these women, and one of the great spokespeople for the anti-treaty side, of course, is Erskine Childers, who you can see there was a secretary during the treaty debates, and the great propagandist Erskine Childers, the writer Erskine Childers, and he's very good at this, and he stands up, makes lots of speeches, and makes a lot of these points on the anti-treaty side, which leads to the mocking label in the press that the anti-treaty side is the Women and Childers Party. I think that's funny. It probably isn't, is it? The Women and Childers Party. But it gives you an idea of the prominence of these women in the whole thing. So, now, the IRA itself, of course, remember, is watching this, and the IRA is sticking to its high ground. There is, and you know, as we mentioned with De Valera, who's in the middle of these debates, such an incredibly prominent figure, what De Valera will do is try and propose, in the midst of these very bitter arguments, his own compromise. And I'll show you here. Here is De Valera here. As you can see, stuck between the two. It's quite a good... So he's trying to... and we mentioned this idea of external association, this very strange idea he has, which is kind of halfway between a dominion and a republic. It's very difficult to understand exactly what he's talking about. But he basically puts all that together now in a new proposal, which he hopes is going to unify the movement, which is called Document Number 2. Now, so this is, I say, the embodiment now of the external association idea. The trouble with this document is, rather than healing the rift, what it ends up doing is proving to be deeply counterproductive and incredibly damaging for De Valera himself. Because most people genuinely, and I'll show you here actually, here it is, don't understand what he's talking about, really. I mean, have a look, I've written it down there. It's full of diagrams and Venn diagrams and graphs and things about how this relationship's going to work. If you remember, the king's the head of he's the head of the relationship and not the head of the state. And again, it's very, very peculiar. As you can see, there's a wonderful quote there. Someone says, one felt, however, we were entering the realm of the purely abstract, nebulous, impalpable and unreal. But I'm sure De Valera knew exactly what he was talking about. But so no, it isn't really, I suppose, a substantive and new departure that most people can get behind it, because they don't really get what he's talking about. But what it does, and this is the counterproductive side of this, is that the IRA particularly, so some anti-treaty politicians are behind this. They smile on the idea. That's fine. But IRA commanders are outraged at this, because De Valera is now himself watering down the Republican demand. And from now on, with this document number 2, you have a growing mistrust of Eamon De Valera amongst the IRA, amongst the volunteers. Their relationship now, which has been so strong for so long, now begins to... he's prepared not to... he's prepared to sell out the Republic with this murky compromise, of his own murky compromise. And, you can kind of date the decline, as it were, of De Valera and the political side of the movement, if you like, from this moment. Because as we see during the Civil War, the military side of the movement, the anti-treaty side, is going to be absolutely dominant. So I say that doesn't go very well at all. So these debates are going on, and I say that everyone's sort of pulling out all the stops, and as it's getting very personal. We mentioned Mulcahy says this, oh, the IRA, you could even take over a police barracks and stuff. I mean, that's really, you imagine saying that at the end of all this suffering and sacrifice, and haranguing each other. What is, as I say, quite remarkable about the treaty debates, and you can absolutely go and read all these now, they're all available, you can read the whole thing, is their lack of reference to the North. No one stands up in these treaty debates, oh, how can we sign this treaty? It gives up the North. It partitions the country. How could we? No one says that. Now, again, later on, people will pretend that's what the Civil War is about, and that's why Southerners were upset and so on. It just is not the case. You can see why, because it's such a substantive issue. Partition, we don't like partition, some people accept it, but it's not about that at all. In fact, if you read the whole of the treaty debates, there are only ever 2 questions asked about the North, and both of them come from Northerners themselves. So it's not an issue. That's not what they're arguing about. If you look at document number 2, for example, it keeps the Boundary Commission clause. De Valera doesn't have any change to that. He keeps the partition clauses kind of in there. And so that's a popular myth that needs to be challenged, I think, at every turn. But I completely understand why people kind of believe that. Now, what happens with the debates is, and a key moment happens in the debates, because they're going to span Christmas, there's a short break given for Christmas. So everyone can go home and have Christmas wherever. Now, this break is to prove absolutely crucial in shaping the responses of the TDs now when they come back to vote. So they sort of have a week, then they go home for Christmas, then they have another week. Because what they do is, most of them go back to their constituencies for the Christmas break. Now, the thing is about this is in many ways the first time many of them have even really been in their constituencies. Because think about it, they're voted in this revolutionary Dáil, then the War of Independence starts, and they're either propagandists, or they're in Dublin trying to raise money, or they're in prison, or they're in the IRA, or they're abroad, they've gone to America or something. They're not constituency MPs, so they don't have these very strong links with the people in their constituency. And when they go back, they start talking to the local bishop, or the local business leaders, or the farmers and the press and so on. And what they're overwhelmingly, many of them told, is we want peace. We think we should sign this treaty. So the thing is, when they come back now, with this behind them, their constituency being very pro-treaty, you get the pro-treaty commitment to the treaty sort of solidifies, because they know that's what their constituents want. And certainly when they come back, things get more and more bitter and more personal, with insults and wonderfully dramatic gestures and so on. And in the end, they will take a vote on this. And I'll show you here a map here. This is the vote here. And the vote is taken, and it's an incredibly close vote. What happens is the treaty is passed by a very narrow majority of 64 to 57. And as I say, this demonstrates, if you take the cabinet meeting itself, how right at the very top of this Sinn Féin movement now, this is cleaved in two. So within the cabinet and right within the Dáil now, absolutely half and half. Now, and you'll see here roughly the areas which vote pro-treaty and anti-treaty. You'll notice, for example, down in Munster, which is, we'll see this with the military side of the movement as well, which tends to always be more radical, more Republican, more separatist. So they tend to vote more anti-treaty. But that's roughly the sort of layout of the constituencies, if you like, and which side goes in which direction. But drama is to follow all this, because De Valera now is in charge of the losing side, as it were, a minority party. And in a subsequent vote, he loses to Griffith in his attempted re-election as president of the Dáil. Because the pro-treaty side are thinking, well, you can understand, we're going to get one of our guys in that position now. And what he does after losing that, dramatically, he stands up and walks out of the Dáil. He's followed then by all 57 anti-treaty deputies. They all walk out now of the Dáil, never to return. It's a marvellously dramatic moment. Now, so he's taken his toys and gone home, De Valera. He's not even going to engage with us. He's not going to accept, and this is what the treaty side say, this is democracy. You're not even accepting a democratic vote. You know, we're all going to have votes in these parliaments. You win, you lose, you get on with it. No, he's walking out now. It's a huge moment, and one that De Valera has been criticised for by many, many people. So what you end up with, and constitutionally, this is in a very strange and rather messy position now, this Ireland that's being created. I'll just give you an idea of this. So Griffith is now president of the Dáil, the revolutionary Dáil. And the Dáil itself, which is the revolutionary kind of body, still kind of illegal, really, in this new framework, but it will carry on existing this alongside the new provisional government. Because they don't want to abolish the Dáil just yet, because it's so symbolic and so on. So that will carry on in parallel, as it were, as this new provisional government's been established. And this provisional government is going to be established, of course, and the reason it's provisional is because its job is basically to implement the treaty, to write a constitution based on the treaty, then to get that passed, and then you can become the Irish Free State. That's the idea. So now, the provisional government itself had been established by the rather forgotten Parliament now of Southern Ireland, which was set up, if you remember, after the Government of Ireland Act of 1921. So there has to be some way of creating this provisional government, some sort of legal body, as it were, to create the government. But you can't use the Dáil, because the Dáil's, you know, in the British eyes, completely illegal, it's revolutionary and so on, and it's already been prescribed. So what they do is they bring together a body which has never met, which is the Parliament of Southern Ireland, and all it does, it meets once, just once, to elect a provisional government. So everyone's ducks are in a row. Very strange. It meets for about 30 minutes now, and then passes the order to establish a provisional government, and then dissolves itself. Very strange now. So what you've got is all these kind of bodies, and I think what's most important is they're all dominated by the pro-treaty side. But of course, as time goes on, you know, you've got both the Dáil and the provisional government now in existence. So you have kind of two cabinets and two sets of ministers. It's very strange. And to add confusion, just to confuse you, sorry, even further, they're often the same people. Very peculiar. But I say the dynamic, of course, is going to be, now you've passed a treaty, that the provisional government has the real power, of course. And I say they're going to lay the foundations now for this new free state and so on, and then dissolve themselves and have elections and so on, like this happened in the north, as we said. So the power, as it were, is going to go increasingly towards the provisional government. The Dáil is going to be kind of allowed to wither away. It's kept in existence, as I say, largely because it's a sort of symbol of unity for the public and for the Republican opposition. I think that would have been a step too far for the pro-treaty side to just abolish now the Dáil. That would have been too far. So they keep it on there as a kind of symbolic thing, but it doesn't really have any power. Slowly that power is being ebbed away. So the new state structures are being kind of laid now. But just a concluding point for today. In many ways, and you might be glad to hear this because of the confused constitution and politics of all of this, this kind of becomes irrelevant, because the people increasingly who are going to make the running are not going to be the anti-treaty politicians. The real action, as it were, is going to happen outside of the Dáil, and it's going to happen with the military side of the movement. And what we'll do next time is we'll turn to that crucial split within the IRA and how that's going to lead eventually to civil war. Okay, my friends, so I'll see you all next time.